It's time for Supply Chain Now, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Heard around the world, Supply Chain Now spotlights the best in all things supply chain, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Scott Luton and Greg White with Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm actually out of the house, Scott.
I know you're out there innovating and entrepreneuring and leading and advising, right?
The Atlanta Technology Development Center.
Well,
in Midtown Atlanta.
So today's show, we have got one heck of an innovative business leader coming to us from the world, the greater business world, but with a lot of experience and innovation in the world of advanced automation and technology. So stay tuned for what's going to be a very informative discussion that will absolutely raise your supply chain technology IQ. Now, with that said, a quick programming note: if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from so you don't miss a single thing. So, Greg, let's welcome in our special guest here today, Richard Schrade, co-founder and president of Automation Intelligence. Richard, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have enjoyed, Greg and I have enjoyed getting to know you and your organization a little better over the last few months. Have enjoyed our warm-up conversation, and we're ready to share you with our audience, right?
Fellow member of Point A also. Right?
That's right.
Absolutely. Yeah. What a cool organization that is too.
Yeah.
So before we talk shop, and we'll elaborate more on maybe Point A here later in the interview, but Richard, give our audience a chance to get to know you a little better. You know, tell us about yourself, where you're from, and give us an anecdote or two about your upbringing.
Sure. Well, right now I live in Nashville, Tennessee, with my fiance, who's a pediatric oncologist. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised, went to Georgia Tech. So big Braves fan, big Falcons fan, and was fortunate to be able to start our company in Atlanta with a fellow classmate of mine in the CODA building, and we're really living out a dream. So we're really blessed.
Love that. So you were born and raised in the Atlanta area. Did I hear that right?
That's right. Born Piedmont Hospital, and have lived within 25 miles of there for the first 28 years of my life, I guess, and stayed local. So I'm one of the few, true Atlantans, I guess you could say.
That's cool.
So Greg and I are big fans of Nashville, big fans of that city. Of course, we're a little bit partial to the metro Atlanta area as well. What's one thing you miss about, not living in Atlanta right now? What's one thing that comes to mind?
Well, I think obviously, my family's in Atlanta and all of my friends and, people I grew up with. I miss them a lot. I'm getting up at 3:30 a.m. Central Time to play golf with them on Saturday. So you see how much I miss them. But, I'd say from the tech scene in Atlanta, as you know, Greg, it's second to maybe San Fran right now,
right.
But just growing like crazy. And while Nashville's certainly on the map, I really miss just meeting people in the elevator, meeting you guys, and really just I feel like I'm missing out on the Atlanta sort of renaissance, if you will. So, but I'm there quite a bit when it's safe to travel. So I do get to see it some.
So what do you like the most? I got to know this. What do you like the most about Nashville?
Well, I'd say I like the most you can get. It's authentic, right? And you can get from A to B in 10 minutes or less. So my fiance and I, we love going out to Broadway, or even just going to see a show, going to see a concert. We do that all the time. And so it's not a big to-do to just, go down to the Ryman. It's a mile and a half, or if we want to go to, Broadway or do whatever, it's very accessible and authentic. It's everything we love: country music, barbecue, Good weather. So we are blessed.
Have you had a Robert's fried bologna sandwich yet?
I don't think I have. I'm not a big fried bologna guy, but
I'm not either, but it's sort of a rite of passage on Broadway. So
I have had one.
You have had?
I have, thanks to my in-laws who took us to Nashville and made that and put that on my bucket list. They put it on there, and one of a kind.
Well, if it happens on Broadway, there's an off chance.
But there's great music there also, Richard. So anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and it's like I said, it's the epicenter of music. It's authentic. People come here trying to make it big, and you see people who are super talented that just haven't been seen yet. And it's a really cool thing to experience. So.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, that's great. So as we talk about your professional journey, share with us maybe any sort of shaping moments that might have occurred before or during your professional journey that kind of helped you shape your worldview or perspective on life or business or entrepreneurship.
Sure. So I think probably the one that comes to mind most is when my co-founder Ari and I, we did senior design together at Georgia Tech, which typically for people, not in engineering, it happens, you're typically around your last year of school, and it's, at least at Tech, exceptionally rigorous. They throw you into a problem and, you show up 6 months or a year later with a solution. And it required of us a lot of figuring things out, using things that you were supposed to be learning in all of your classes and making it happen. So we did a project for inventory routing of cash, which was really cool. So when should we go visit ATMs? How often? How much money should we put in? Do we take out a lot of cash and pay interest on it, or do we take more transportation fee and going to visit more often, albeit with less cash? So we developed an optimization model around that. And Ari and I spent many late nights, 2, 3, 4 a.m. in the Georgia Tech library, VBA code. And this was before Python was big. So doing that and GMPL, optimization language, figuring it out and failing and being frustrated and finally, getting a solution that worked. And I realized, I was excited every day to go and work with Ari, at, 7 or 8 p.m. on a Friday night. I'm like, I want to be in the library. I want to be working on this. And we worked really well together. And so at that point, I even may have said to him, I don't know if I did or not, but I thought at least that, hey, this is something that we can capitalize on one day. And, let's figure out a way down the road for us to work together and do really cool stuff like we're doing now. And here we are.
Hey, 2 quick questions. So first off, what food powered those late nights? I'm assuming the Waffle House came into play at some point during those long nights. But kidding aside, you mentioned Python, and I'll be the one person out of all of the folks listening to this that doesn't really understand what that is. Maybe explain to those folks that may not have come across Python and embraced it yet. Why is that so popular these days?
Well, it's amazing is really what it is. It's open source. So there's been this huge shift towards, from like the Microsoft paid platform or Apple towards open source. And now you're really trying to focus on, going after like the cloud computing thing. So that's a whole nother discussion. But for us and for most people, it's sort of an ecosystem that's, again, open source. Anybody can come in and suggest edits to common packages or common utilities that people commonly use. You can create your own. You can. So it's really just an ecosystem where if there's anything you want to do, instead of being a construction worker, you're more of a plumber. You know what I mean? You're just piping things together, and you don't have to know all the nitty-gritty details. And in just a couple hours, you can stand up a website or come up with a machine learning application.
Right.
You know, take things that other people have done and copy their ideas, you know, with their permission. So it's, I think, you know, its effect, open source, their effect on at least the data science community and the automation community, I don't think it's yet been fully understood. So it's really amazing.
It's hyper efficient in terms of doing math and complex calculations. So it's become really popular in a lot of these optimization solutions as well. Right. And you're right, Richard. It has, you know, it's basically a platform, and it's plugging things in rather than writing them from scratch.
Right.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you.
All right. So eventually you had to graduate from college, and I'm curious. So did you and Ari partner up right out of school?
No, we didn't. No. So absolutely. So, Ari went, Ari is an incredibly bright guy and loves being down in the weeds. And so he went on to do his master's at Tech. He was the first class of the Master's of Analytics program at Georgia Tech, which has grown in popularity like crazy. I started doing it, albeit the online version, a couple of years ago before we started this company. And then he went on to do his PhD in machine learning, and I mean, got way technical with non-convex optimization and things that even I don't fully understand how all that works.
Right. Don't ask for definitions of those things, Scott. You don't.
Okay.
And so he went off into the academic world. I went into consulting. So I was part of a company that for other companies that don't typically automate things. Maybe they do it once every so often. They update their facilities and they do capital projects. We would be their advocate to sort of figure out what robotic solution made sense for their ROI threshold and their application. What's a Cadillac option? What's more of a Camry option, if you will, and sort of be that behind the scenes brain for companies that didn't really know which way was up. So specifically my group there would be ones that would sort of dive into the details of the design. We would use simulation modeling to figure out even down to the details of, are we going to have a photo eye that's too close to, the rails, or a package moving by that's not going to be able to see it, all the way to, do we need 5 lines? Do we need 6? Do we need 4? So we were helping influence some of those higher level decisions and lower level decisions through some crafty modeling.
And what company was that?
That was the Haskell company,
okay.
Who has a branch here in Atlanta as well that focuses on consumer products and packaging, which was the division I was in.
Got it. And where'd you head from there?
That was my last stop until this.
Wow.
So that
Richard, how long at Haskell?
7 years.
Okay.
6 or 7 years.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about kind of your vision for automation intelligence.
Can I interact?
How you formulated your vision for it.
If I could interject for just 1 second.
Sure.
So you and Ari already knew each other, right? From all that work at Tech. Can you think back? And if it's not one conversation, I know that this is my 4th venture, and I can almost think about each of those singular conversations that led to each of those. Is there a moment, or is there a time, or is there a meeting? Is there one thing where you and Ari said, you know what? Let's light this candle.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was January 8th of 2019. And
who's counting?
I was commuting back and forth from Nashville to Atlanta quite a bit. And I think it was a Friday or Thursday afternoon, and I was headed back to Nashville. And I would text him maybe once a year or a couple times a year and just check in. I said, hey, I'm in Midtown. My brother-in-law at the time worked at Empire State South, which, if I can give them a plug, amazing food. Probably my favorite restaurant in Midtown Atlanta. So there's that. And so he said, well, I don't know. I gotta go to the gym, and I'm doing this stuff for PhD or whatever. And I was like, okay, no worries. He said, well, let's do it. Let's go to dinner. Fine. I'll move things around. So he was telling me about what he's doing. I was talking to him about what I was doing, and there just was a flow there. There just was like, oh, well, what you do makes a lot of sense with what I do. And if we put these things together, I think we're the missing piece for each other, so to speak. And so he said, well, why don't we look farther into this? We're not going to rush into something, but let's put a business plan together. Let's see what's out there. Let's, kind of hash it out. Let's throw wrenches at it, like we like to say a lot. And so we did. So from then till through the end of March, we thought it all the way through, planned it out like typical engineers would, and then April 1st started day one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Cool. Sorry, Greg, I didn't mean to interject, but
no, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. That's incredible. All right. So day one, what did you contemplate that automation intelligence, or however you conceived it at first, would be, and what has it turned out to be? I'm interested in that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, if you ask me the same question a year from now, it might be different. I think that we knew what we could do and what we were good at and what we wanted to do. I think how it all fit together certainly changed and has really kind of matured since we started. So we knew we were great at developing digital twins, and we knew that for consumer products and for e-commerce that there was a great business case for helping companies test out really deeply their systems before they go and buy it. Multi-million-dollar systems, you don't want to take a risk there. We knew that there was a play. What we didn't know, and what we're maturing into, is how digital twins can play into the machine learning and AI space. So for machine learning specifically, what people lack is an accurate representation of reality to train these agents. And then just a brief sort of aside onto what that is and how it works. Essentially, machine learning and reinforcement learning is a brain of a baby that hasn't been trained yet. And so this baby makes actions or doesn't make actions and then learns from it. And it replays this episode hundreds of thousands of times until it becomes sort of a master at doing whatever work that this agent is supposed to do. So some companies, you think of Unity, provides a platform that you can simulate one robot with physics, inertia, interactions, but there's not one that can do an entire facility. And so that's what we provide, is a platform to do that, as well as some of the know-how to people don't know if they have a machine learning problem. And so we do, and we can find that. So that's one piece. And I think the other piece is that people that want to adopt AI, or at least have the power to, are risk adverse. And it makes sense. There's always going to be snake oil in these buzzwords that you hear about. We're doing AI, we're doing machine learning. What are you really doing? And so what we can do is take a skeptical look at AI, at machine learning, people that say they do it, and put their money where their mouth is. Say, okay, here's a digital twin of the facility. Let's see what your AI can go do. And what that gives is people who don't want to lose their VP job over some AI that doesn't actually work and doesn't do anything that provides value. Maybe it works, but it doesn't provide value. We're going to find that out orders of magnitude quicker and less expensive than you would if you were to go do it, in real life. So
that's fantastic. So Richard and I were on a call at Point A, and he gave his TAD talk, I think they call it, but basically where you present to all the other members what your company does, and the ability to test and verify things without having to actually physically or even technically deploy them and see the result is an incredibly transformational technology. So for instance, you know, I come from demand forecasting, planning, allocation, replenishment, all of that. Immediately, he's grinning because I shot him a note during his presentation, probably disturbed him, but immediately my thought was, wouldn't it be fantastic to test for, let's just say, one of Blue Ridge's customers, right? So one of Blue Ridge's customers does equipment like this, Arc'teryx, or Arc'teryx, however you're supposed to say it. And theirs is orders of magnitude more expensive than North Face and Patagonia and that sort of thing. So knowing how what we would recommend and they would execute would impact their investment and deployment of their goods and availability of their goods would be really, really valuable for them. It would also accelerate the decision process for solutions like that. Any solution, really, because
Absolutely.
they get a view of what the possibilities are. So usually I would ask that question, Richard. I would ask the question, if you've got a pain, what are the keywords in my head that would have me go to automation intelligence? But that's really it. If you have a pain that you want solved by a particular solution and you'd rather really test it, like virtually test it rather than have to actually deploy it, this is a fantastic methodology for doing that. Earth-shattering, groundbreaking, transformational, disruption, all those things. It's all of those things. So
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, you hit the nail right on the head, and you know, I appreciate it. I think, you know, I would add to that, you know, when you, in the course of doing this and recreating an existing system so you can compare it against maybe an optimized system, you know, our clients are, you know, they're not AI specialists. They don't know if they have a problem that AI can solve. You know, we've gone to have a few customers that say, well, you know, we've got a person that sort of every time this happens, you know, we use a spreadsheet to do this, or, you know, we know when this happens, we got to do that. And so, you know, they don't know that they have these problems. So it's sort of a sneaky way to say, hey, you know, there's people like Greg out there that, you know, have a way to optimize what you're doing pretty quickly. We can show exactly, you know, what it does, how it works, and measure, you know, A versus B. So it's, like you said, it's a way to show it before you do it.
If I can weigh in just for a second here about AI, you know, clearly, you know, Greg, it dominates a lot of our conversations, right? Has for a couple of years now. I was reading in a well-respected magazine focused on economics, maybe a street up in New York. Won't elaborate any further. And they had a great thought-provoking article about how some companies have kind of hit a wall in terms of how to best use AI, and it's led to kind of a in terms of AI talent, data analytics talent. You know, some of these folks finding themselves out of a job, unfortunately, because the companies and the leadership have not just, in some cases, not been able to crack the code on how to really unleash the power. Either one, you know, there's all kinds of views here, but what does that mean to either of you?
Go, Richard.
I'll start. I think that there's, especially with respect to prediction, I think that AI, one of its principal use cases is to be able to make better predictions. For forecasting is especially so. Can you notice deeper trends and large feature sets that can give you insights that typical forecasting can't?
Yep.
However, there's always going to be inherent noise, inherent randomness that nobody is ever going to be able to predict. Even the most, a machine learning algorithm 1,000 years from now, there's always going to be a cap above which you're not going to be able to improve. And I think that if that cap for your organization exists 2 inches above where you are now, you're not going to see the payback. it's not there. It's unfortunate, but you might get just a little bit more, but it's not going to pay itself off. So I think that's the main thing, is that there's always going to be sort of, black swan type events and things that you're just never going to be able to predict. What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent example. And I think in addition to that, you have to acknowledge that AI takes a tremendous amount of data and a tremendous amount of training to be effective. So you need, one, patience. Okay, that's enough to cap most companies.
Right.
Two, you need a tremendous amount of data. Or what you need, and this is something that I've been working with over the last several years, you need a blended strategy. You need to use linear models or traditional math, for instance, for prediction, for forecasting. You need to use traditional math or traditional forecasting methodologies in addition to, or as an augmentation of AI, until you have enough data to support and teach, and then for AI to evaluate from, and then you can get there. And what I have not seen is a lot of companies taking that kind of dual deployment type of approach. They go all AI, and sometimes linear math will solve the problem really complex, but linear math will solve the problem really efficiently, and yet they've spent all this money on AI. It didn't give them the solution. They find a linear math solution, and out goes AI. So I think you have to acknowledge that you have to have an understanding of where AI is really necessary, where linear math will sufficiently do the job, and where one can augment the other until AI is the solution.
Gotcha. Good stuff. I appreciate that. That was probably 2 questions too early, because we're going to broaden out the discussion in a moment. But it seemed to hit me as Richard was sharing some of the things, and some of the things we've heard a little bit about, and some of the things we've heard a lot about. That's very helpful feedback from you both. So, Greg, I think as we start to kind of wrap up this segment on Richard, I think we're curious about where he spends his time, right?
Yeah. Well, one, if you've got an example of somebody who is using your application, and I think other than what we've described here, I think it would be great if you have a case study, or maybe even a potential one problem somebody wants to solve. Then yes, I want to know what it is you do all day, Richard.
Sure. So we've been really fortunate to get some big name clients early on. So our first big project was with Amazon in their a new facility that they were developing late last year, that they needed to be online for the Christmas season. So that was the first big one, and UPS is probably our biggest client to date. Doing a lot of stuff, most of which I can't talk about. What I can talk about is sort of their way of embracing this technology and pushing the limits on what it can possibly do. And they have incredible engineers that work, really close to our offices, just up in Alpharetta, that use it. What we're doing is we're basically doing a pilot we're creating a full digital twin of one of their facilities, and we're using it to see how they could have or could in the future make better decisions. So if you think about a UPS facility, let's say it's 2 days before Christmas, everything that I'm ordering, everything that you guys are ordering, so much stuff, probably 25-30% more than a typical day, is going through these facilities. And so what we're able to do is basically develop a plan for how we're going to manage all of this stuff going through. We need to figure out what trailers to unload at what time. We need to know that if we unload a trailer of iPhones, that's going to be a lot of small packages that are going to be difficult to manage if we unload at the same time we do as business cards. So we need to sequence that. Also, we need to know if we have a trailer outbound for LA, it can't be next to one going to New York, because there's just going to be too much of a bottleneck there. And so there's so much complexity and so many systems that all are interconnected in these facilities that we are trying to find ways that we can, on a very simple level, let's try out our plan 3 hours before it. 3 hours before this sort. We can run it in fast forward. Oh, 2 hours in, we're going to overwhelm one subsystem while another one is totally vacant. Let's tweak our plan and run it again. Tweak our plan and run it again. Now we got a really good plan together. And then there's this element of AI, just what we were talking about earlier. You know, we don't have time to fail with AI that is going to take, is going to take us off a path that isn't going to work. Let's see if we can use it in a digital twin and get that, see if it beats our baseline. You know, if we get an AI module that can predict sorts better, or that can manage our flow better, let's see if it works. It'll take a few weeks. It'll take, some pretty skilled engineers, but we can do it a lot faster than going and disrupting an existing facility, potentially creating a catastrophic failure and ruining all of their subsystems rather than just one. So they've, that's a really interesting application for it, and one that I think is going to be, in 6 months or a year, very front and center.
Yep. Well, of course, part of that play is risk mitigation, right? Yeah. And if you could do things in a petri dish,
the biggest.
Yeah, that's right. Petri dish, or whatever is the modern equivalent of that from a technology standpoint.
The digital equivalent, right?
Yeah, the digital equivalent of a petri dish. Right. Yes, whatever that is. To isolate that and be able to experiment on that and really be able to uncover the gaps that you're not even sure, you don't know what you don't know. I mean, that's got to be so powerful.
I couldn't say it better than that. I mean, and that's going back to one of the things, what have we learned in the last year and a half that we've been doing it? I think that the play that risk has in what we do is far greater than I expected or anticipated.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Amazon, which everybody knows, of course, and as always is a talk of, what's that, Greg?
Which we must do in every episode.
That's right. Talk of the town. I mean, they're doing so many things. But speaking of experimentation, which clearly is one of the great advantages you offer, there's a great, and I'm not going to get it right perfectly, but Jeff B is a huge fan of experimentation. And, we talked about it a few weeks ago, that quote where basically he says, if you can experiment a couple hundred times a day, great. But if you can experiment a couple thousand times a day, you're just going to go so much faster and be able to do and innovate so much greater. So I love to hear those synergies you have with some of your customers that you can talk about. I'm sure plenty of others you can't. Greg, you were going to say something?
Well, no, but actually I wasn't, amazingly, right? But you made me think of something, and kind of referring back to Unity, which Richard talked about earlier, and Danny Longa, who is one of the greatest AI philosophers of all time. We talked about agents, which are essentially babies who need to learn, right? And we've also talked a lot about how Danny believes that throwing more agents at a problem, right, 2,000 instead of 200 or 2,000 instead of 1, makes the learning go that much more quicker. You don't need better minds. You don't need better mathematics or solvers. You need more of them.
Yeah,
because they start to teach and learn from each other, and also they experiment so much more quickly.
Yeah, well put. All right, so let's shift gears here. And Richard, as Greg put it, I want to know what you do every day. Is that kind of how you said it, Greg? I like that.
Yeah.
Man, well, you get up early and we work late, for sure. I think that we've done a really good job at focusing on doing an awesome job on our projects and geeking out on the things that would blow our customers' minds, things that they don't expect, maybe things that they didn't pay for, things that they don't even know are possible. Virtual reality is a whole nother discussion we could get into, but that's one that, when we go to deliver a project and we're able to say, hey, you can actually run the line in VR and interact with, the computers and the buttons and things like that. So we stay focused on executing the work that we've got and doing a really good job. I spend most of my day supporting my engineers, giving them what they need, kind of pushing them to do as good of a job as we can, and get a good process in place and get a good scalable business in place. So I'd say that's probably 80% of my day is supporting my team on their projects and making sure we're doing good quality work. The remaining 20% is probably what anybody who owns and runs a business is dealing with. QuickBooks and taxes and
light bulb, full garbage cans, right?
Full garbage cans.
All
Yeah,
that.
we work open as it closed. So all of just the administrative stuff that comes with it that I'm not a huge fan of, but that's the rest. So.
Yep.
So do you get involved in the solutioning or the sales process or that sort of thing? I assume because you're still relatively fledgling that you're doing some aspect of that, right?
We are. My goal is to kind of get our brand out there, let our work market itself, and, let our customers' experiences be what leads people to us. And so that's why our focus has always been and will continue to be on doing that. As far as sales go, we really try and find organic channels like you guys where, our potential clients are already going. I don't like getting email, especially from people I don't know. So I doubt any of our potential clients do. I look for ways for, events, places, periodicals or things like that, where we can put our message out there and people consume it and educate themselves in an organic fashion and in a way that they want to, rather than having it pushed on them. So we do spend some time on that. I think we should spend, more time developing videos and blogs and case studies and things like that. And so, we're going to be doing more of that soon.
Outstanding. All right. So let's shift gears, Greg. You ready?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So there's so much going on when you look at the global end-to-end supply chain, right? We're not quite in, even though we've seen lots of great signs and in terms of that, I'm going to say it, folks getting into the new normal,
Right.
That's a cliche for a big, very real reason, but we're just starting to get there. There's so much going on related to the pandemic and what's to come. There's plenty of other challenges in industry and just outside of industry. What are one or two things that come to mind, whether they're trends or challenges or innovations, you name it. What are a couple things that are on your radar more than others right now?
Yeah, two things come to mind. I think that where new things are becoming automated that weren't previously automated, that's where we have an especially keen eye. One that's a really neat one is marine terminals. So moving containers on and off of ships, onto rail cars, onto trucks. Only 5% of the world's ports are even somewhat automated. And it's predicted that based on the numbers, how much it costs to automate versus how much, there is in not only running in an existing manual process, but, impacts of disruption. I think 2024, 50% will be, which is a huge number. And these are huge undertakings, a ton of risk, as we talked about earlier. So we have a keen eye and are looking to adapt our existing platform and technologies to be able to support automating marine terminals. So that's one thing. I think one, maybe not a vertical, but one technology that we are especially focused on is prescriptive analytics. So there's a number of companies out there that specialize in predictive analytics. You know, what's going to happen, what could happen. You know, Greg is an expert in that. But we see an opportunity for people to answer the question, well, what should we do? If this, then what should we do? How do we maximize our opportunity with the limitations of our constraints? And so when we take a focus on AI, that's sort of our niche, is being able to help influence and potentially in the future automate the decisions of this is my reality, what should I do? So.
Love it. Yeah, and that is a critical, it's a critical translation, right? Everybody, particularly in my space, they think that the forecast is sufficient. And often it's left to the discernment of a human being. And, you know, studies, especially again in the space that I'm really familiar with, have shown that 84% of the time humans make the wrong decision. So
absolutely,
it's not that we're terribly effective there, right? And we need a lot of help. And even if a prescriptive solution can't make the final decision, it can at least get you past some of the initial considerations, right?
Yeah. I think a really cool example of sort of that transformation from manual to more of like a systematic approach is how scheduling works in Major League Baseball. So it used to be, and Scott, you're a big baseball guy, so you might know this. It used to be there was a couple, and they would work for months with index cards and moving them around on which team was going to go where and how the road trips were going to pan out. And baseball purists like Scott and like my old man love that type of stuff. That's the way it's always worked. And these two people, they do it, and that's how they, you know, how they like to see it. But you know, what we're capable of doing now is like you said, prescriptive analytics approach is let's plug in the constraints. We're not going to have a road trip longer than 7 games.
Right.
You know, we've got to play everybody in our division, you know, at least 15 times. Give us the schedule that maximizes revenue. And so that's what we're able to do. And it does it a lot better than people, which, you know, some peers would like to admit. And it also, you know, does it to, you know, to optimality, which I just think is beautiful. If you can find the perfect solution out of billions, it gives me such satisfaction. So
I'm with you. And you know what? I appreciate, I've never been called a purist. I'll wear that label with some pride. However, you know, I can't be called a purist because I'm a fan of the DH. If the AL is going to have, if the American League is going to have a DH, the National League's got to have a DH.
We can't be friends anymore.
I'll tell you why, though. It's about protecting the pitchers. If the National League, which are huge investments, so if the National and you know, one of the last Brave seasons, not to take too much of a sidebar, when Tim Hudson got hurt running to first base, well, we got to protect the pitchers. If the American League pitchers aren't gonna bat, then you know it's got to be
on. Yep.
Yes, he got his ankle stepped on.
I have to sound off on this because I come from an American League city, Kansas City, right? This essentially invented the American League, right? And Johnson. And my feeling on the DH is that if the pitcher has to bat, he's a lot less likely to throw at another player.
That's fair too.
Right. And that is my logic for why no DH.
I'm with you. I just want it even. Both sides, either they have it or they don't have it, you know? All right. So I love your example though, Richard. That is a great, I'm going to steal that from you. I did not know.
Derailed you, Richard.
Yes. I'm going to steal that. You might get some royalty checks from me down the road. That's a great example. All right. So you've got some exciting news coming up as we move into the summer. It seems like you've been quite the hot commodity. Folks, as the word gets out, you're going to be doing a lot more interviews, right?
We are. And, you know, I think that we are going to be investing more time into sharing our message, you know, like with you guys, creating better content, more podcasts, more videos, more case studies, so that, you know, if people come along and they're interested, they want to learn more, they don't have to, you know, call me and I don't have to type up an email, they can sort of get it for themselves. So we're going to be doing more of that. I think that there's awesome messages to share, some really cool stories of projects in the past, and some cool partnerships that we have coming up. One is with a few Georgia Tech labs, and more information on those when it comes to fruition. So exciting stuff this year. We're going to make the best of 2020 if we can, and keep it a great year.
Love that. Well, Greg, let's before we make sure our audience knows how to get in touch with Richard, you mentioned Point A's come up a couple of times, and you've talked about how Richard and his team are part of Point A. Let's just make sure everybody understands what that is and why that's so cool to have Richard and the team be part of that.
Yeah, so I'll just give a brief explanation. Richard, maybe you can give some color commentary around it. But Point A is a supply chain focused innovation hub where big companies with problems that they want solved, sometimes disruptive to truly disruptive to their industry, and early stage and startup companies like Richard's and Verison and other members are presented with these problems, and then the organization comes together to create, propose, and fund and execute a solution. Hopefully a solution that the early stage companies can then go and market to a greater marketplace. But it's a great ecosystem that creates a symbiotic relationship between those who have need and money, but perhaps an established, a traditional, even a legacy point of view on certain topics, and these early stage startups that have a new and disruptive point of view on these same problems to be able to solve those problems or progress towards a solution to those problems. It's a great organization. We're a member. Richard's a member. Verison, UPS, Georgia Pacific, Capgemini. About 45 companies, I believe, are members right now.
Yep. And we'll be opening our second studio there, and being there probably as soon as July. As everyone else, we're trying to figure out our own strategy while we still piece together the cutting edge studio that we have in mind for that spot. But Richard, y'all been a member for a while as well. Mm-hmm. Have you enjoyed? Tell us about your experience thus far.
It's been an awesome experience. I think it's a drastic shift in the way that these problems have typically been solved, and I think it's ingenious. I think you bring together, any great solution is going to typically require many parts and pieces, and you bring them in ahead of time. I think the best part is that it's agnostic. You know what I mean? There's friendships, but when it comes down to it, may the best plan win. May the best proposal win. You have competitors in there. Microsoft and AWS are probably the two biggest. And I think that when you can, it's sort of like, playing video games with your friend. You know what I mean? Like, you're friends, but you're working against each other. You're working, you're trying to innovate as best you can. So I think it's awesome. I think that we've, learned a lot and gotten such a great experience. The people who work there not only are trying to create an awesome experience for the members, but they're also doing extraordinary work with respect to COVID. We had a call in March, which was, hey guys, we don't have a full proposal like we typically do, but what can we do? And out of that came Project 95, Project N95, which is basically this program that's now going to help producers produce these masks and PPE equipment faster, cheaper than they have before. And it's just, if that would have happened without a Point A, it would have either not happened or taken a ton of money or a ton of time or both. And right. So Point A has just been an awesome organization to be a part of, and we're thankful to be there.
Yeah, love it. All right, so Greg, as we wrap up this interview, what are our audience members just dying to know?
Yes, Richard, I have a feeling you might get a phone call or two, or however. So tell our listeners, our audience, how they can get in touch with you.
Well, email works, richard@autointel.io. You can find us on LinkedIn, Automation Intelligence. Our website, brand new website, just got upgraded, autointel.io. And we'll be coming out with more Twitter and YouTube stuff soon. But yeah, that's how you can find us.
All right.
Outstanding.
Cool. Yeah.
And stay tuned to all the industry publications, podcasts, you name it, as Richard and Ari and the rest of the team.
I think some of our friends might be wanting to talk to him pretty soon.
I think so too. Richard, it's a pleasure to connect with you. You know, we've really enjoyed the conversations leading up to really sharing you and your story and what the Automation Intelligence team is doing, all the big things. I mean, heck, you're working with Amazon, you're working with some other big names that we can't share today. That is such a the term rubber stamp approval doesn't do it justice. I mean, clearly you are doing some big things early on, and we'll have to have you back on and have you give us an update on how the year wrapped up.
I'll be happy to. Thank you guys for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
All right. So stay right there as we wrap up here today. Greg, you were going to add?
All I was going to add was this is, it's encouraging and energizing to see a company we see a lot of companies, right? And I see a lot of companies, and I see a lot of companies that are doing great things. It's a rare instance when one stands out so dramatically as a transformational technology. And I think additionally, where the story is so clear cut and apparent, that you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be involved in the industry. You just get it, right? You can get it at a human level. So I think big things to come for Automation Intelligence.
Agreed. Agreed.
I hope I'm right. I just said that, didn't I?
So, hey, big thanks to our featured guest here today, Richard Schrade, co-founder, president of Automation Intelligence. You can learn more at autointel.io. Real quick before we sign off, Greg, another great episode. Really enjoyed Richard's perspective. We want to invite our audience. We've got 2 events coming up. Yep. One is a June 25th webinar all about ERP best practices as we get into the new normal.
Yeah.
Shortage of challenges there. We've got RootStock coming on and making
Tom Brennan, right?
Brennan.
Great visionary thought leader in terms of ERP at a company that has a cloud native ERP solution, which is a big segment of the future for technology.
That's right. June 25th. You can learn more about that on our events tab at our website. Also, on a whole different note, July 15th, we are hosting a panel as we continue our stand up and sound off programming, which is really important because it makes everyone, it's very interactive. We want the panel to share their thoughts and perspective as well as our global audience. And it's all about the race challenges we have in the industry. And we're going to tackle that head on. And we look forward to what our audience has to say and what they want to contribute in terms of what the issues are, as well as some of the things that have to happen. Greg,
and a really thoughtful panel.
That's right.
I think a very, very powerful panel.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to get Richard and
new voices. It's going to be a powerful discussion.
Agreed. Richard, we'd love to have you and your team be a part of that discussion. You can find all of that on the events tab and other resources at supplychainnowradio.com. Find us, of course, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. Tune into our live stream so you hear thought leaders like Richard, share their story and share their take on what's going on in the industry today and tomorrow. So on behalf of Greg White and Scott Luton, the entire team here, we'll see you next time on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.